Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Pathways to Healing, the Perfect Step podcast. We're your hosts, Cody Norman
and Logan Frye, process recovery specialists at the Perfect Step, also known as TPS.
We are not doctors and are not prescribing anything, as this podcast is for informational purposes and should not be considered legal advice.
We are, however, sharing knowledge and experience that we have gained from working for years with clients in the paralysis community.
The guests on this podcast include members from the paralysis community sharing their perspective and insight.
Suggestions and advice that we share may affect each person differently, as not one injury or diagnosis is the same. On today's episode, we interview Lisa Hilborn. Lisa is a Casa Colina's Director of Outdoor Adventures and Recreational Therapy, along with wheelchair sports. She also previously worked for the Lakeshore Foundation.
Lisa shares a plethora of knowledge that she has on adaptive sports, including at the professional level and the recreational level. She shares coaching stories from her past, as well as where she thinks the future of adaptive sports is going. Stay tuned on Pathways to Healing.
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Pathways to Healing. Today we have Lisa on. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you.
Yeah, no, I think we're excited. Lisa, can you go ahead and give our guests or our listeners a quick introduction to yourself?
Absolutely. My name's Lisa Hilborn. I am a California native. I've lived in Alabama, been in the field 35 years, and I think if I summarized who I am, I love to move. And I love to have people, if you will, drink that Kool-Aid, get moving, get active, and enjoy what especially Southern California has to offer, and in the process, hopefully enhance your longevity.
Definitely. Where does that come from? Where does that stem from? Were you an athlete yourself your whole life?
Yeah.
And what sports did you play?
In college, I played basketball, softball, soccer.
Wow.
Went to school to play ball, and then realized as I was there that, I can think too. is really what's true. I just, first word was ball. Loved to move from the second. Walked it, I think, 8 months or some ridiculous something, and just have not really stopped, to be honest.
Wow. Then does that bring now today into your position and your role of what you're doing today? How much of that love and empathy for sports now brings you to what you're doing today for so many people?
Yeah, I think sport is this beautiful vehicle to travel down, right? That path. It's like sport can be, I look at it as like this amazing opportunity to move, but it also can pull people into a positive environment and provide the opportunity to reintegrate and re-socialize into society. Sometimes a society that, we'll talk about barriers, I imagine, today. And I think the biggest barrier that people with disability face is in the minds of people without disabilities. And so much of the time, I don't have to say a thing about ability if somebody comes and watches my athletes play. Right. That's just a lesson in ability right there.
Yeah.
So, awful lot of fun.
Very well said. I think, like you said, there's so many differences when you think about sports, but there's also differences in abilities when it comes to those sports. And you guys provide a great opportunity for a lot of people with different abilities to also get involved in those sports and your adaptive sports. Where did your entrance into the adaptive sport world begin? How did that start?
Yeah, so I went to school, and as I was in my final year, a professor in adapted physical education sat in the stands, and I like to tease that Dr. Rizzo heckled me into adapted physical education. He'd come to all my softball games, and he's like, "You would be great at this," and I'm like, "No, I want to be a coach, but thanks," and it didn't ever click that this is coaching at the highest level, because you can take somebody that society looks at as not this amazing athlete and facilitate that process to where that person is totally integral to the game. And that I absolutely love. And I've come to I've been blessed by the opportunities that I've been given in this field, like I can't tell you. And so Dr. Rizzo said, "You'd be great in this field." I listened to him, accepted a graduate teaching internship at Cal State Long Beach, taught classes, and a small part of that contract was to develop or redevelop a wheelchair sports program at Rancho Los Amigos. And so that was in 1990, and just loved every minute of it. Taught classes at the same time, and then at a certain point said, "Oof, this is what I want to do." I thought I wanted to be a university professor. That was my path, and I am so happy that I chose athletics and was true to what I wanted more than anything. And the athletes that I worked with at Rancho were phenomenal. We had 12 different athletic teams traveled around the nation competing in a variety of sports and just loved every minute of it. We kind of cracked the joke that we grew up together. I was so young. It was 5 years difference between half of my athletes and I. And we just had a great time together playing ball. And prerequisite to that program was that you were back in school. And so I believed in that to the core, and every one of my athletes was back in school and participating fully in their lives.
Wow. How long were you there for at the moment?
20 years.
Wow.
So, yeah.
For some people like myself who don't know about the adaptive sport community, who did you guys compete against? So you said you traveled the nation, so it was Ranchos Los Amigos. Do you guys compete against other hospitals that create, or are there other professional organizations that you can then compete with? How does that work?
Such a great question. I will first say that there's a really big basketball tournament at the University of San Diego this weekend, and that will be something to watch. There are teams from all over the nation coming in, Division I teams as well, Division II and I. It will be a tournament. And so, yes, teams from all over the nation, and hospitals, recreation centers that develop programs, and organizations like the Lakeshore Foundation, Turnstone, different training sites have different teams. Ability 360 in Arizona has some amazing teams as well. So, it's small pockets around the United States that offer wheelchair sports. And, you look at the big picture on that, and you said something earlier that just really is so key. There is so much of the time a sport or an activity that yields itself to success for different individuals. For example, at different programs, wheelchair hockey, I had an amazing goalie, right? But he wasn't as good at tennis and he wasn't as good at basketball. Mobility was a thing, but he had reflexes like I've never seen, right? And perfect reactions. And so that kind of thing, it's fun to watch and go, ooh, what do you like? What is your interest? And how does that fit into this world of adaptive sport? So, a lot of fun.
Are there certain organizations or schools or hospitals that are kind of ahead of the game when it comes to competitive nature? Is there like a Lakers of, wheelchair basketball, to use that as an example? Are there organizations that are known for producing high levels of talent for that?
Absolutely. Great question. And the ebb and flow is so interesting, right? So Casa Colina is the first rehab center to have had a wheelchair basketball program. 11 Hall of Famers in the National Wheelchair Basketball Association. David Kiley, who I consider the godfather of wheelchair basketball, literally started that program and kept it going. And so you talk about big shoes to fill with Casa. There's a legacy there that's phenomenal. But right now, there isn't a really big wheelchair sports program at Casa Colina. So I go back to this ebb and flow. Texas has got an amazing program with TIER. University of Illinois was the college that started wheelchair basketball. Amazing legacy and history there with the individuals who created the rules, in essence, of wheelchair basketball. But tons of hospitals and organizations, like I say, Ability 360 has some amazing programs, rugby, basketball, tennis, and they do everything. We climb together. We meet in Joshua Tree in April, Ability 360 and Casa, and we literally climb rocks together.
Wow,
it's just,
cool.
fun to blend with other organizations and learn and grow from each other.
And because I know that eventually we're going to get away from the national and talk more on the global level, how is the United States when it comes to the global competition?
Depends on what sports, right? So that's, I think you asked a question that I could talk on for a week, because I just love the opportunity to try to impact a sport in the global sense. So if you take rugby, for example, we took silver in Paris. We were very good,
Wow.
Exceptional. We got beat by Japan. And Japan had so many things going for them, probably superior equipment, and the opportunity for us all to learn from each other when it's not a Paralympic year. Literally, their best player, Ike, played on our team at Lakeshore, and that brought the level of competition up at a rec level exceptionally. It also taught Japan some tricks of the trade, right, that U.S. is doing. And so that goes back to the philosophical debate. Do you covet that information and make USA better for a moment, or do you elevate the entire platform and make the world better? Philosophically, it's hotly debated. And you know what Lakeshore did? And we had Ike on our team for a while, and they took the gold. Is that why? Probably not. But I believe in sharing the secrets and trying to elevate every single level of sport all the way through, at any level.
I love that.
Youth, adults, sports for people who have quadriplegia, parasports like basketball. And this inclusive nature is probably one of the most important things I think we can do. I think including everybody and enabling or fostering, fostering the inclusion is the key to making sure that everybody feels welcome and empowered. And that's something that, as I have grown in this field, I have come to learn more about, and am eager to learn even more as we go through how to include everybody and make everybody feel welcome.
I love that you use the word fostering and including everybody and being inclusive with all these different kinds of sports. That includes so many people with all different types of neurological disorders. So would you mind kind of sharing what other types of individuals with what kinds of disabilities are able to be eligible to play wheelchair sports?
Sure. So it varies with sport. So wheelchair basketball, you have to have a lower limb impairment, and that could include somebody with a congenital anomaly, spina bifida, cerebral palsy. It could also include somebody who has an amputation in the lower limbs, or somebody who has a spinal cord injury, and various other disabilities within wheelchair basketball. Wheelchair rugby is involvement with all four limbs. So it's a sport specific to people who are tetra or quadriplegic. So it's different all the way through. And I think one of the most important things to understand is that sport, at least adapted sport, makes an effort to equalize the playing field. So two basketball teams have a similar number of points, and the points level the playing field. So an amputee would be a higher point value out of your global number of 5 players. Somebody who has a higher lesion level, like a T4, they couldn't just bend down and easily grab a ball and right themselves without touching their knees. They're a lower point value. Those points equate, and each team has to have a relatively equitable number of points on the floor. And
interesting.
It's a strategy and classification.
With that strategy and classification, do they have barriers for playing time?
Great question. So there's nothing that says you can't play your class 1s longer. In fact, I build a team around a class 1 who can stay in. If they're my smartest player on the floor, and they usually are, because they got to figure out how to get in the front door of most businesses. So you don't have to limit their playing time, but they may limit themselves by the inability to play the entire X number of minutes in a game. So your smart class 1 who is in shape is a weapon.
Very interesting. At Casa Colina, we know that you are the Director of Outdoor Adventures and Recreational Therapy at Casa Colina Hospital and Centers for Healthcare, as well as the new role of wheelchair sports.
Exactly.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that experience for you. How has that been, and how long have you been there so far?
That's a great question. So I look at this role as one of the opportunities of my life. I have been given some incredible opportunities, and the opportunity to be back in California at Casa Colina, where David Kiley was one of the people starting this program, and Gus Lazar ran it as well, who is a good friend at Ability 360. Those are huge shoes. I'm super clear. But I look at this opportunity and take seriously the magnitude of what I've been given. Casa Colina is supportive. Casa Colina has bought sport chairs. Casa Colina is looking to create an outdoor field where we can play together and combine clinical experience with sport on a court on our grounds. Amazing. And that investment and that belief in wheelchair sports and adapted activity and inclusion feels unbelievably great. And that's probably underselling it. I go to sleep going, I can't even believe I have had this opportunity, and just I'm looking at every way to capitalize on it and to try to catapult us quickly back into wheelchair sport. We're trying to start with a quad rugby team, as well as a basketball team. Basketball is my love. It's what I've done for years. But I know a little bit about rugby too, and so we'll have some fun.
Very cool. One of the things you touched on right there was the chairs, right? I'm sure everybody who can you change the camera angle? Everybody who can see this podcast is going to be able to see the chair in the background. It is not a conventional wheelchair. Can you go through the anatomy of how the chair is a little bit different, and talk about it a little bit?
Yeah. So this is a basketball chair. You can see that it's tall. It's set up to play ball. You've got a bumper in the front so that before your legs and knees hit, this guard does. And you'll notice that the individual has the opportunity to become one with the chair with a strapping mechanism. So you've got waist strap, knee strap, and we would also pop on a foot strap. And so when that individual shifts or changes their center of gravity using their head as a counterbalance, that chair turns. The 6 wheels on the ground provide great stability. Additional stability is provided by the camber or angling out of the wheels. There's 110 pounds of pressure in each of these tires, making the rolling resistance minimum, right? This thing turns on a dime. You've got the quick release pins for a flat or any other thing. You've got rollerblade casters, right? And what's so fun about this is known as a Spenergy. We stole this from the world of bike racing. We put carbon fiber spokes on this. Literally, if you pulled this off, it would wrap around your finger, but it's got a lot of flex and a lot of strength. Lower maintenance, initial high cost, but the maintenance is minimal on these, especially if they're well cared for. And this chair is, like I said, a basketball chair, but it is dialed into the ergonomics of the individual. So if they are, you notice the chair is a relatively small chair. So it's about 13 inches, 14 inches wide. And this is specific to basketball, but if it were a tennis chair, it might sit a little bit lower with smaller rims and meet that individual where it is, right? So let's say somebody who used this chair was an amputee. You'd have a much more narrow cage right here for their leg. You might not need to strap them in. Your backrest would be about high because they have pretty good balance most of the time. And so what I'm getting at is these chairs are highly specific to the individual, the sport, and the position within the sport. And you start thinking about that and you go, okay, that chair costs $3,000-$4,000 to purchase. And what if your kid grows, right? And let's hope he does. But doggone it, that chair no longer is beneficial for that child or that person as they progress through life. Or what if the kid is just like I was and I want to play basketball, I want to play soccer, I want to play tennis, and I need a different chair for each. My parents would have lost their minds, right? My investment was tennis shoes and a racket or whatever else. Somebody with a disability to be able to go out and play different sports and experience things needs to link up with a place that's got all these chairs or gamble that maybe I'm going to love basketball, but then you got a basketball chair if you like tennis, so the equipment is expensive and cost prohibitive. But one of the things that we're trying to do at Casa is to purchase enough chairs that we provide the opportunity to adjust them a little bit for each person that sits in the chair and make it versatile enough that this chair in a given day currently easily is used by 4 different people. You know what I mean? On a day where we're playing sport, we just adjust it a little bit and make it work. And the hope is as progress goes through and they're loving what they're doing, we talk with Challenged Athletes Foundation, Kelly Brush Foundation, all these organizations, Christopher Reeves, and say, can you help us with this grant? This person is in this chair playing sport 6 hours a day. They love it. We really want to get them this piece of equipment. And those organizations provide that funding to purchase that piece of equipment and hand cycles and every other thing you can imagine, just again, to embrace movement, to embrace
Fantastic.
life.
You answered my question before I even asked it, but I was going to ask how those chairs can be specific for what type of individual based off what kind of disability that they have or how their body is presenting. Well, so what kind of disability, for example, would somebody could use that chair?
So it'd be good for an amputee. It'd also be good for somebody with a lower lesion level who has a lot of balance, their abdominals and their intercostals. Much of the time what we do is we put a body point strap that's somewhat flexible around the backrest, come around the waist. And so literally it creates a false set of abdominals. It's pulling you back, but it's also inhibiting because you go to reach and you're like this, right?
Right.
You can create bucket in a chair, meaning your knees are higher than your waist or than your hips. And literally I have less distance to fall, again, creating a false set of abdominals. And that's all about how do you make this tool more functional for the individual? Because so much of the time in the past, the chair would feel like there's tons of stigma around it, right? It's like, oh, you use a wheelchair. We'd push through the airport and people just, oh, and it's like, whoa, wait a second. This is not a stigma. This is in your mind maybe a stigma, but this is a tool. Okay, this is something that this individual uses. It does not define them. It is merely a characteristic to get this individual, in this case, flying through the airport. I mean, we fly through the airport now, and literally little kids are like, I want one of those, because they do look cool at this point, right? We have stepped up our game, so to speak, in the development of the technology and really applying it to a sport chair. You see how easily this chair turns. And, if you've got a racket in your hand, you don't want to spend a ton of time with your hands on the rims, right? So you're stroking through, and by virtue of that momentum going this way, that chair's flipping back around and coming forward for that person to pop the ball back over the net, and you're ready to react. That's what you want. Just same as somebody who stands up. You want to be an athlete. You want to have the opportunity that anybody does. And this tool gives you that. It can, if it's adjusted correctly and measured right, give you the opportunity to play on the highest level possible.
That's awesome. What does something like that weigh?
This chair is at about 23 pounds, 23, 24. Yeah.
That's incredibly light.
They make them out of titanium. I mean, you can really go. This is just a standard cushion, but they've got a Cornby cushion that's just a honeycomb, wicks sweat away, so we're not sitting in sweat, reducing the incidence of pressure sores, and really making it to where it's very light. So this is just a typical foam cushion, and chairs can go very light and very, very specific. You can look. If you looked up Esker Vergen of the Netherlands, she plays in a tennis chair that literally was made by a prosthetist. Because you look at this chair and you go, well, that's a great chair, but our butts are not square. Right? It's like, that does not fit us perfectly. If you get a chair that is dialed into you perfectly, the center of gravity can go further back by virtue of these back two wheels. And it is very responsive. And this type of chair that Esther has, you can just literally, it is poetic. There are a few basketball players that literally the way they move is just like a dance in their chair. It's just a fluidity that's phenomenal. Pat Anderson from Canada, a few athletes that you just stand back and watch and go, I can't even believe what I'm seeing.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, so it is.
You obviously are very passionate about the tool and how far it's come in its ability to allow the athlete to perform. From your perspective, as you've kind of mentioned, you've been a coach and you understand the fundamentals of the games that you're coaching, but you also understand how the tool works very well and it allows an athlete the ability to perform or not perform. Right now, and where we are at with adaptive sports, would you say that the tool is the main separation of talent or skill level versus people's ability to coach and perform? Or would you say it's more even still on the coaching side and ability to understand the game of basketball or something like that?
Both and. So at the elite level, we're talking. Okay,
yes, sorry.
No.
Talking
great.
Olympic level,
Okay.
like
So much fun. Paralympic level elite sport, in my perspective, and this is hotly contested, but in my perspective, it is mental toughness. It is, can you stick with it? Right? If you've got the equal equipment, if you've got great coaching, and in almost every scenario you do, you're at the pinnacle, right? You're at elite. So can you stay focused? Can you stay in the moment? What can you do to pull it out when there's nothing left? You've been going the entire tournament and everybody's wanting to, in the case of rugby, we were there in Paris during the gold medal match. And it's you stand back and go, this is as high a level as it gets. And you watch these athletes dig deeper, and the team that can stay mentally focused, from my perspective, from what I've seen, is the team that pulls it out. Can you follow what your coach is calmly explaining and your captain is calmly communicating from your coach, because he is your extension, he or she are your extension on the floor? How well do you execute as a team? And that's my opinion. It's about mental toughness. It's about the ability to persevere. And I think that's another reason why I love sports so much. I think you can pull that into life, right? All the lessons we learn in sport, unbelievable. It's like, oh, I just don't think I can do it. Yeah, you can. You know, you sit at that free throw line, you nail it because you can. And this cross training in sport, one of the things I used to do an awful lot at Rancho is most of my athletes had no interest in tennis whatsoever at Rancho. And it was a prerequisite to be on the basketball team. If you had the mental toughness to be able to serve and know that it is all on you to get it in that box, you're going to do well on that line when everybody's watching you and you're focused right on the back of that rim. You can keep that focus. It teaches this individual component of a team sport to take it to the next level.
What advice would you give somebody that wants to take it to that next level? Somebody that is just starting out at wheelchair basketball or in tennis or rugby, and they want to continue their career with that. What advice would you give to somebody that can get their foot in the door and get their way started into getting there?
Get to a place where you can work with a team and learn and grow. Basketball has a proximity rule that you must play with the team that is most proximal to you based on your level, you know, Division 3, 2, 1, or collegiate. And so you need to live near the team you want to learn with. And I think there's a little bit of opportunity there. And it's an exciting opportunity in this world. California is starting to reemerge. For a while, we just didn't have that many basketball teams or even tennis tournaments. 25 years ago, there was a tennis tournament every weekend of the summer, a wheelchair tennis tournament. And we're working together as a community to try to redevelop that. Perfect Step, Claremont Club, Triumph Foundation, and Casa Colina are hosting an event, the Roll and Rally Sports Blast, in March. And that is exactly that effort. We are looking to say, hey, community, come get engaged in this beautifully inclusive sport of tennis. It does not matter if you stand up next to me and I sit down. I get 2 bounces, you get 1 bounce, and I would argue that is more fun to play what is up, down, or roll and rally, or wheels and heels than it is to play standing up, because the strategy involved with me getting 2 bounces and you getting 1 is unbelievable when you're processing. Do I take that on 1 bounce? Do I take it out of the air? What is the angle? Somebody coming up on 2 bounces on a tennis net can come completely across the court and it's done, right? Just there are so many things that are so much more fun when we include. And so we are working with the Perfect Step, and proud to do so, and Triumph Foundation to host what is going to be an up-down tennis tournament and many other things. We've got some surprises under our hat for that event as well.
Likewise, we're proud to also partner with you guys, and we're super excited for it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, in March
15th, it's a Saturday.
Yeah,
yes.
15th. Yeah. Awesome.
One of the things that you also touched on before when you were talking about your position at Casa Colina and the things you guys are able to do was this combination of bringing back this idea of recreational sport to the recovery process. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit?
You come up with the good ones. Yeah. So Casa Colina is one of these amazing places that has state-of-the-art rehabilitation and looks at injury or illness and says, how can we serve? What do we do to maintain dignity and take it to the next level? And this very broad continuum of service that is provided at Casa Colina is something that we get to inject ourselves in. Okay, so like somebody first day at Casa probably won't see me come in the room, but shortly thereafter, I'm going to do anything I can to get in that room and go, hey, I know you can't do anything right now. Probably can't get out of the bed, but look at this iPad. This is what you can be doing. Just want you to be aware. There's basketball. There's all kinds of sports. And hopefully I will remember to ask what they like to do first and say, these are some things related to what you like to do. And the cool thing about what we're doing at Casa is it's not just sport. It's not just adaptive activity. It's, do you like to rock climb? Do you like to sail? Do you like to go on outrigger canoes? Would you rather sit on a gondola? Would you like to go in a hot air balloon? What would you like to do? And in nearly every case, we can say, we're going to have that happen. We host a huge event known as Beat the Heat every year, and this year it's going to take place in May. And this is kind of, if you will, a microcosm of what takes place the entire year. So at that event, we're going to do deep sea fishing. We're going to do all kinds of wheelchair sports for an entire day. And then on the third day, we're going to do all kinds of water sports. And that is actually literally a preview of what we do year round at the Outdoor Adventures and Wheelchair Sports Program at Casa Colina. So your question's good. It's a huge continuum, and we just try and insert ourselves all the way along that continuum where appropriate and get people out starting to maybe see it on an iPad first, then watching, and then literally putting them in a sport chair and going, how does that feel? Does it hit you? If it doesn't, let's try something else.
Very cool. One of the questions, because you kind of mentioned, because you said iPad and you were talking about the sports thing, is there a like esports or video game type thing that you guys also do, or is that something you guys are looking at in the future?
But it does exist.
Does it?
And
Okay.
I will tell you that one of the silver linings of COVID was a tragedy, and you're never going to hear me say anything different. However, one of the silver linings out of the world shutting down is we had to go virtual, right? At Lakeshore Foundation, we literally went virtual almost overnight and literally started pulling everybody in, exercise sessions. We got a green screen. We did all kinds of things. We worked with Dare to Try, during virtual triathlons and every other thing you can imagine to keep people moving. And what that did was create the opportunity to nail one of the barriers, because one of the biggest barriers for people with physical disabilities is the inability to have transportation. Right. And so that has continued, right? The virtual opportunity to link, to build community, to work together. Triumph Foundation regularly does meet and greets on, I think it's Wednesdays, and they just get together and talk about stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And Lakeshore does an awful lot in the way of moving together still. We don't do as much, but we're a team of 3 at this point. So we're kind of small. We're trying to grow.
Definitely.
Do you know who you said there is like a video game or kind of esports thing?
Yes.
Or,
yes. And I'm not as familiar with it.
Oh, no, you don't know. Yeah. Okay. I was just kind of curious if that was something that existed.
It's a thing. Yeah, for cool. Sure. And the Oculus and a few different things. Our research department does an awful lot with VR. Yeah. And trying to take in balance issues and looking at it. How does it relate with Parkinson's? And, we've, as employees, we sometimes get to be the controls for things like that if we volunteer. And so I've done a lot of that and just been blown away by what we can do with VR. You could be wherever in a hot second and it feels like you're there. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. You mentioned Lakeshore Foundation a couple times. We know you were the director of athletics and training site there at Lakeshore, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. How was that for you? And you oversaw youth and adult recreation programs as well as athletic teams, and seeing that you managed team training at the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic training site as well.
Yes.
So what was that experience like for you?
Again, I feel like I have been giving more than I deserve as far as opportunity. Lakeshore was one of these amazing opportunities to learn and grow. And much of the time, there's a very large staff there, and we literally would just sit in a think tank and try to puzzle with issues, right? We had 12 athletic teams competing within our club system around the United States. And then what's really cool is Lakeshore is still the home of USA Wheelchair Rugby. And so every single USA Wheelchair Rugby player would literally fly into the Lakeshore Foundation to train and try out for the team. Literally, you have to re-up every single year to be on the team. Wow. And then as the home of USA Wheelchair Rugby, Lakeshore brings in teams among the best teams from all over the world to try and make US better. And so that opportunity was phenomenal. Lakeshore has a 3-camera system on 2 of their courts. And so wheelchair basketball is known as a sport of inches. Literally, my push room ahead of yours, I'm in charge, right? And wheelchair rugby is basically the same. And so there's a camera at Lakeshore that literally pans straight down in the key to where you can see, oh, you were a fraction of an inch off. That's why you scored the goal. So the analytics, the real-time analytics are phenomenal at Lakeshore. Super high tech isn't even the word. When you combine that with coaching and the ability to analyze sport, it's one of the most exciting places to be for elite sport, because Lakeshore doesn't just do rugby. Lakeshore has every sport you can imagine, entire research center, a 4,000-foot gymnasium. It is an impressive place, and it is all literally built. You know how most hospitals have a tiny wheelchair sports program?
Okay.
Lakeshore is a massive wheelchair sports program for people with physical disabilities of any age. And the community, if you live in the same house, with a tiny rehab center. Okay, so it's flipped everything on its head, and it's one of these places where you can get treatment for sure. But if you want to go be physically healthy and active and increase your longevity, Birmingham, Alabama Lakeshore Foundation is one of the places to be for sure.
That's so cool. You transitioned kind of, away from that to go back into more of the hospital side of things. Can you talk about that transition and maybe your desire and want to try to bring some of that recreation back into the hospital setting and why you thought it was so important? Yeah,
so Rancho for me was grassroots sports, right? It's developing people as people, right? Helping foster that development and athleticism all the way through, in many cases, introducing the sport to an individual who's never played sport. Right. Lakeshore is both. We had tons of grassroots program and elite athletes coming in. And really, when you think about it, when do you ever get to say, oh, hey, to the Paralympian, right, who just won gold and he happens to be right there? You know, our kids used to just lose their minds when these guys had come back from the Paralympics. And Casa has the capacity to be both. When you really think about it, David Kiley has won, I think, more than 3 gold medals in snow skiing, basketball, and, he's going to kill me, tennis, I think. Good friend of mine, David Kiley, I don't know why I'm blanking on that. The guy's amazing, okay? Paralympian running Casa Colina, okay? And the opportunity to emulate that and to really look at some of the things we're set in place is key. And so my dream for Casa is anything it evolves to be. I had thought that we would start basketball teams like that. I have been given people with quadriplegia, and we are going to start a rugby team, and I couldn't be more excited about it. I look at so much of it is what do we need? What do we want? How do we fit in? And that's probably one of the first conversations I had with Hal and Andrew is, what do we need in California? How can I work with you? You guys have done such beautiful things that are taking place. How do we work together, right? How do we collaborate? How do we further develop community? And Casa is really trying to be a piece of that on every level of what we need.
So important because you mentioned, the ability to shake somebody's hand who is a Paralympian. We actually got lucky enough to interview one. She was a cyclist.
Yes.
That kind of made me wonder, are you guys going to have a cycling program, or do you know who we're talking about?
Amanda Bosco.
Yeah.
Yes.
Samantha. Yeah. She was awesome. She, lives right
Sorry,
here.
these are my heroes. They're Paralympians. They talk all day.
Well, it's so cool. So immediately mine went to her. And are you close with her? Are you familiar with her?
She wouldn't know who I am.
Oh, no.
I know who she is. Yeah.
Do you guys have, or are you planning on starting a cycling program?
Yeah, so I don't know that we'll have it team. We call ourselves Team Chain Reaction. We have ridden in the Tour de Foothills, which is a local race in Upland through the chamber. We rode with Aaron Baker, who is, okay.
He's also been on the podcast.
Okay, of course he has. Yes, of course he has. Amazing.
Yes.
Impressive individual.
Incredible.
Talk about the
Very.
definition of grit.
Yeah, mental toughness you were talking about earlier. He
Yeah.
came to mind.
Fortitude.
I bet he did.
Yeah.
I bet he did. Another one that I've learned so much from conversation with. And so, again, we've had amazing opportunities to have people near us. We got to ride out with him on his ride out of this area. That was amazing. And so I don't know that we'll start a team of racing because that would require an awful lot of money in equipment. But, we're on the beach paths with Ramp most Saturdays. It's the first Saturday of the month. There's a ride from Bolsa Chica to Huntington, and we have a whole lot of fun with that. We have a couple of hand cycles and a couple of recumbent cycles, and I try and keep up. But, they're just gone. They got me by, I got them by 30 years. So I'm going to take up the rear a little bit sometimes, but I get there.
There you go.
Let's say somebody had recently gotten injured and they got checked to Casa Colina. Is there a time limit of how much into their recovery that they're able to now participate in those sports? Or is it just dependent on the individual and how their personal recovery is going?
Such a great question. So we require a medical clearance from their doctor, and that is it. And I think that's one of the things that I'm most proud of. Yeah. Any community member who is interested in participating with us, we just say, come on, right? It doesn't matter if you're a Casa patient. It doesn't matter if you're young, old, doesn't matter what your disability is. Wow. We would love to have people just come participate with us and have fun together. Some of it is just truly about fun. We're going sailing tomorrow. We're starting at the Long Beach Sailing Center. It's a U.S. Sailing Center. We're starting at, I think, 10:30. We'll sail till 2. We'll have lunch together on the water and just have a beautiful day together.
That's
now,
so cool.
There's not a lot of athleticism there, but they do learn to sail the boats. Literally, the skipper talks to us all the way through, and the people that will be in my boat will sail that boat.
Wow.
So it's a lot of fun.
How would somebody sign up, and where can they get more information about that? About
I'm happy you asked. casacolina.org/ODA, which is short for Outdoor Adventure, ODA.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And we've got a calendar up there, I think, all the way through March right now. Cool. And we literally have our calendar planned through December and are just adding to it. I mean, we're going to the Rancho Cucamonga Quakes opening day. I want a game, maybe not the opening day. I'm not sure that worked. But we just got back from Ontario Reign game, the feeder team for the Kings.
Yeah.
Just fun stuff because somebody said, I'd like to do that. That's what we do.
That's so cool.
Beautiful.
So you guys get people pretty fresh out of their injury or accident or diagnosis. Can you talk about the things that you've been able to see in the recovery side of things? Not that the things that you guys are doing are directly correlated with a recovery, but I'm sure, as you've seen, there's a mental, physical component when recovering from an injury like that, that a lot of people might get stuck in that mental part, and that hinders their ability to physically recover. Can you touch on that a little bit?
I'll start with, I don't pretend to understand how it is to have a physical disability. Right. I don't. I've watched for 35 years people deal with physical disability, and I feel unbelievably proud to be part of what is sometimes a very strong recovery. And we're all at different phases of life, and the space and time spent together, I think, is about learning so much of the time. And there's no one thing that works. There's no one thing that makes it easier. Everybody says, oh, time. And I think the worst thing I could do is go, oh, this is all you need, right? Understanding that I don't know is probably the most important thing I can do. I am somebody who is an ally. I know I'm not an advocate because I don't have a disability. So I have allied my entire life and am proud to have been an ally, and want more than anything when I move on for one reason or another, I want more than anything for it to have mattered that my ODA team was in the lives of the people we worked with. In-game to me is it. And sport happens to have mattered over the years to many people.
And do you think there's a direct correlation between somebody being able to mentally recover and what we were talking about before, the mental capacity that's required in order to compete at a certain level in a sport? Whether it's, I mean, recreationally, you still might have a competitive nature and a desire to win at whatever the activity is. Do you think there's a correlation there?
There is, and I will say that it's frustrating as fire sometimes to come out and try to learn how to push a chair with a racket in your hand or with a ball in your lap. It's not easy. It is a skill that takes the grit and the perseverance, and it's an outlet. It's a lot of fun. And once you get past the frustration, and if you're patient with yourself and the person who's working with you understands how to be truly patient, I feel like it can be a beautiful vehicle. Sport can be sport recreation activity can be a beautiful vehicle. And it isn't for everybody. No question about it. It is really difficult to adjust, especially if you don't have a tool that is specific to you. It's a challenge. And if you feel pressure, or you feel if all the way through your head is, I can't. I don't pretend to understand how difficult it would be with a disability, but I do understand that people with disabilities can more relate to and work with, and somebody who has lived experience much of the time can make that connection. And so we work with people with disabilities to mentor, to foster tremendously. The Casa Colina does an awful lot. And I think that is a key to our success as an organization over time.
Very well said. And earlier we were kind of talking about the realm of addressing social or societal stigmas around people with disabilities. What are some ways that you feel like wheelchair sports can break some of those barriers? Now, not only for those people that are dealing with those disabilities, but maybe somebody else that's on the outside perspective, an able-bodied individual that is watching some of these sports or watching some of these people participate in those recreational activities.
So I believe the biggest barrier that somebody with a physical disability faces is that in the minds of people without disabilities. And so that education that takes place with sport, so much of the time, nothing needs to be said. You go on to watching rugby or hockey, and you look at that and you go, 90% of people without disabilities cannot do what that individual just did. Definitely. So I don't have to talk about, hey, he or she would make a great daddy or mommy or employee or friend. Right. The sport does it, right? We do an awful lot with kids. Traditionally, I've done an awful lot with kids in schools and exhibitions, and really trying to break down the barriers of stigma that so often surround people with disabilities through sport. I used to start with a little bit of a talk. I don't start at all with a talk. I just start with these guys going at it, and you have their attention. And then you go, hey, look at that. Isn't that impressive? And then we set them in chairs, not that they would understand what it is to sit in a chair because they needed to, but because we give them an experience to see if they can do what that individual who's athletic did. That's the mindset, right? To teach, oh, there really isn't something I know here. I don't know how difficult and challenging it is initially to push a chair until you develop that skill. And so that, without saying a thing, teaches that that individual with a disability is an athlete, if they want to be.
From the way you talk about it, I'm sure that you've had a lot of growth in your experience of working in adaptive sports. Can you talk about how your ability to teach, coach, mentor has adapted from when you started, and maybe touch on some of the things that you feel like you would have missed out on had you chosen your original path of a career of coaching?
That's a great question. So I'll start by saying I think I've made every mistake possible. I'm not kidding when I say I grew up with my athletes at Rancho. I was very young. I was very black and white. I was, you're Rancho. You're just Rancho. You don't go anywhere else. And that is so narrow-minded. So that is an unbelievable lesson. Now, it was 1990 and there were very few sports programs, and I was trying to build a team, but I look back on that, and had I more fostered community with the entire group at a tennis tournament or the entire group at a basketball tournament, how much further we would have gone as a society, as a whole, as a group, and how many more friends all of my athletes would have had. And so I think that's a mistake that I've grown from, for sure. And, you know, I look at the opportunity to teach as incredible, right? I think teachers shape the world. And I think you both could probably name a good teacher and a really bad teacher, right? And
Absolutely.
yeah, right? I could name really good coaches on one hand and bad coaches on all my fingers and toes, right?
Yep.
And I don't say that lightly. And I think it is our responsibility to mentor in a way that fosters the entire individual. I don't care if you're an amazing athlete and you could be this amazing person. Look at what's going on here first. You are not just a person to score a goal or to, and I was coached in that way for a while, and it just doesn't make a healthy individual. And so I think as a credentialed teacher, that was one thing that was drilled into my head. And I'm like, you crazy. I'm going to go coach athletes. And they finally got through to me that it's, how do you teach? And who do you teach? And what is your end game in teaching? And it really, Cal State Long Beach drove that into my head. And I'm pleased with that. And had I been a university professor, I think I would have had a fulfilling career. I think I would have enjoyed it. But I think I might have become sedentary. And that would be very sad to me. I love to move.
I love that you use a different reference than what we use, and I'm sure he might not know exactly where I'm going, but as soon as I say this, he will. You use the, what was the end game? We were always told, what is the why? Why? Why are you doing it?
Very
why
good.
At the end of the day, why did you do it this way? Why do you want to do it this way? Why do you want to continue doing it? So I love that you kind of have that same philosophy of understanding, like, what's driving us? Why are we doing this?
The open-ended question. I love that.
Yeah.
It is amazing what you get. We end each practice, and I don't officially have a team, but we get together and play. So we end each practice with a quote. And what's fun is to go around and listen to the interpretation of the quote. There's so much learning that takes place. You know what I mean? I sit back and go, oh, wow. I hadn't thought of it that way. And that is one of my favorite parts of the practice. And that's actually saying a lot.
What's your favorite quote that you've used?
So this it's probably more revealing than I'd like, but it's not about the loudest voice. It's about the person who at the end of the day sits down and says, I'm going to try again tomorrow. And I'm paraphrasing it because I can't get it exactly, but I don't really believe there's anything such as failure. I think you have a different opportunity with every single day. And as somebody who makes a lot of mistakes, I stand back and go, how can I get that right tomorrow? I truly do. Because it's easy to coach and to talk like this. Most of my life, I've been a coach, and you have 60 seconds, right? And so I make the best use of 60 seconds. But then you think about, how did you say what you said? And how was it received? And how did that person feel when you said what you said, right?
Yep.
So that's hard. You try very hard to be the best you can be. And, we all fall short. But what do you do with it when you fall short? I think is the question.
Yeah. But I mean, a very, very shorter version of that, I guess, is just, you don't lose, you learn. You win, succeed, or learn. So at the end of the day, what do you get from that opportunity of failure? If you were the person at the free throw line and you missed that last shot, what did you take out of that? We were told in our college careers, it's a blessing to be that person who messes up at the end of the game. Out of everybody in the stands, out of everybody in the world, you got to be the one who, at the end of the day, the game came down to you. So how do you change your perspective on, oh, I lost my team the game, into I was the one who was lucky enough to have that opportunity. So
I was
it's just
entrusted.
such a unique perspective to have, right? Because
it's super hard, especially in the moment or right after the moment. You're 2 minutes into you just lost
Right.
the game as a team, as a collective, and not that any one game, as you know, comes down to a single play or a
Right.
single moment, but how do you
Right.
flip that switch as quick as possible? And I think the best part from what you're saying and what we got from a very good coach of ours was how, as a mentor, do you allow the athlete or the individual to get into that perspective change as well? And how do you help them get to that point to where they can make that an opportunity of growth?
Absolutely. God, that's well said.
Yeah, we call it not pointing the finger was a
Right.
big thing for sure, and pointing the finger at yourself, right, and kind of thinking within of where did I go wrong, and if you were holding the ball or holding the basketball, the baseball, whatever it was on the last moment, and you ended up having that failure, that adversity, it's like, well, that's an opportunity for growth, like you said, and I think that's gonna be able to allow people to come so far with so much adversity that they've had, and that all comes down, I think, to leadership. A lot of those perspectives, a lot of those lessons come down to from the coach, from the leader of the team. What are some ways that you feel like you're able to be such a great leader for a lot of these individuals that want to participate in recreational sports, or at Lakeshore when you had all those opportunities to coach? What were some of your leading techniques and styles that you used in order to keep them engaged and keep those athletes willing and wanting to come back the next day to practice?
First, I'll say you never analyze a win like you do a loss. And so I love what you just said there, because so many coaches go, we won.
Right.
It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
By the grace of God, you won. What did you miss? Right? And so I think analyzing the win as much as you analyze the loss, and the guy at 42 seconds who missed the shot as well as the guy at 0.7 seconds, analyzing. So I think the analysis is part of leadership. And I think that, it starts with coach. If the coach is the leader, the coach is the person who made the decision. So if we lose, it's on me, because I could have prepared, because I could have, scouted better, because that person would have been more mentally tough, have greater grit. It is on the coach. And so accepting responsibility, and when I point the finger, how many fingers are pointed at me, right? You've heard that. That's so true. And what makes people come back? I think consistency. Some people say, hey, how do you develop a program? Show up, right? Really show up. Be there 110 focused, right? I am here for you. I am here for you with school, with sport, especially school and life, but sport too. Right? And sport is this joiner. I used to live in Cerritos when I was developing the Rancho program, and I had a pool in my backyard. And I am telling you, we spent a lot of time swimming. I don't like water. But it was this beautiful medium, right? To get together, to talk. And it was a perfect opportunity. And something similar in Alabama. We'd get together in times that we weren't required to, right? We'd eat together. I think there is nothing more important than people knowing you care, and they matter at the end of the day. And I think spending time together off the court and bonding and learning each other, really learning each other, and what somebody's commodity is. Does it really matter at the end of the day that you sit shoulder to shoulder with somebody, or they're kind of like, I'm going to let you go? You learn that really quick when you spend actual time with somebody. And so we spend an awful lot of time off the court together. And my ODA team, Gabe and Michelle, we all work together. We spend a lot of time together outside as well, trying to learn each other and know what we need to do to make ourselves the best functioning team together. And again, as the leader of that team, I am responsible when we fail, and I own it, and I darn well better. And they know they have parts in it. And they know their parts can be very big, and they take it seriously. And I have a tremendous amount of pride with all the people at Casa. I think Casa is one of these places that you stand back and turn around, and everybody wants to be part of the solution. And there are very few places on the map that are just like that. Lakeshore is definitely one of them, and Casa is as well. And that feels tremendous. It feels like you're part of something so much bigger than you that matters far beyond you being there.
Be part of the solution, not the problem.
There you go.
Yeah.
I think you didn't use the direct word, but you're breeding culture, right? You're not trying to create a company. You're trying to create a culture at that point, and culture creates buy-in. Buy-in creates success.
That's
I
Casa.
think like there's just as people who have been a part of something like that and have been lucky enough to experience something like that, like you might not use the word, but that was
No, you're right.
immediately like what I thought of, like just created a culture, and culture creates buy-in. Buy-in leads to success as a team. And that does start at the top.
For sure.
You know, you being able to take accountability as a leader and understand that I am the one who the finger should be pointed at first. At the end of the day, I'm going to be the one who looks in the mirror and says, you know, what could I have done differently to allow for my team to succeed is so important. And I think that's why you would probably say, lucky enough to have so many opportunities. But I think your ability to do those things has led to those opportunities and continue to allow you to have so much success within your career.
Thank you.
Very well deserved and well earned.
Yeah, very well.
And I like how you said owned, because I mean we're all about the extreme ownership aspect of that, like you said. You know.
Last question for you here. Around the perfect step recently, we have been focusing on how individuals have been reinventing themselves or reinventing their lives. Can you yourself give a story, or can you share somebody that you have seen reinvent themselves and how that has led to them succeeding in one way, shape, or form?
Rather than saying one individual, I will say that I think wheelchair sports, and I'm going back to this, everybody teases me.
No, do it.
Please do.
I look at sport, and I think sport has the capacity to transform life. Whether it's adapted sport or stand-up sport, it is the reason I went to school. It is the reason that I got up many days, because it's like, ooh, we're going to play some, you know. And I see that with the people with whom I work. You know, there is so much excitement for a bike ride that we're doing, or an adventure, or an activity, or, you know, some of the sports we're trying to create. That transforms lives. From my perspective, sport and activity has been my life, and the opportunity to share that, to me, is the most unbelievable blessing I could have ever asked for in a career.
It's awesome. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for being on today, for taking your time. It's been a pleasure to have you, and thanks for sharing all your insight with our audience and with everybody that's listening. I'm sure everyone learned a lot as well as we did too.
I know. I learned so much. Thank you so much.
I have enjoyed talking with you both so much. You are engaged, and we're just going to keep chatting after this. The microphone's going to stop. We'll just keep chatting. I know there's a ton to learn from you both.
We very much appreciate it. So
absolutely.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of Pathways to Healing, the Perfect Step podcast.
Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, share, and feel free to leave a review by clicking the link in the description below.
If you have any feedback or topics you'd like for us to cover in upcoming episodes, go to our website under the tab Pathways to Healing and fill out that form.
Until then, keep inspiring, stay resilient, and roll on.